It's January of 2018, and this is the first episode in the Insight to Action podcast. My name is Dawna Jones. I'm your host, and I thought today's program would involve giving you a bit of an overview of what I see ahead for business for 2018. I think it's going to be an extremely exciting year. I've been watching and paying attention a lot to what's going on with governments and politics, but also what the effect of that is on the leadership in companies. And so in looking back, I see that some of the decisions that politicians have made have prompted leaders to make more value-based decisions. And I wrote about that in the Huffington Post, but it's the difference between making a decision based on what you believe in and making a decision based on what's important, what you value most, what transcends all else. And so that's the one thing that I think is pretty exciting. We also have, and this has been the imperative and the actual background for not just this program, but also the one I started in 2008, which is the Evolutionary Provocateur podcast. And that was really to help people, the companies and individuals and leaders adjust, adapt, make the kinds of decisions that make a difference in today's world. And today, it is the decision making is the portal for that. It is the leverage, and of course without leadership the bold decisions can't be made. So this is where courage and leadership are closely tangled up, very tightly tangled, very tightly intertwined, put it another way. I've been really grateful for all the people that have come onto this program, everything from self-management to perspectives on quantum physics and how that impacts relationships inside companies. And at the broader level, at the global level, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me in terms of global health and the capacity of the planet to really support us through all the life support services that we take for granted? We don't even think about it. We don't think about why the honey shows up on the shelf. We don't think about how milk ends up there or anything else for that matter. So it's not until these natural disasters strike that there is a greater awareness that we do live on a very volatile system at this point, because there's been compromises made to the resilience of the planet to recover. So more than ever, this is a time for leadership. More than ever, this is a time for companies to completely shift the level of leadership from looking at purpose as a profit-driven, shareholder-driven, narrow benefit kind of aspiration, which is quite limited by nature, to much higher, more meaningful, more beneficial across the board to really restore, societal, system-wide, ecological, and economic health. Now, if I look at the surveys that companies where they survey executives to sort of say, hey, what's top of mind, I don't see things that speak to the understanding that there is a interconnectivity between all things. This is not something I made up. This is physics. It's science. It is. There are interconnections. For every action, there is a reaction. For every action, there is an action. And so it goes bigger than that. And the background for me, and I'm going to speak personally now, came about when I was a kid, because I spent a lot of time in the woods watching birds do their thing. Woodpeckers hammering on the tree, moving up and down the tree, how they do it, the observation skills that go with being in nature gave me, I think in the end, a real edge for being able to observe organizational dynamics and for being able to go deeper into why things are the way they are, what's showing up and why, and to not just sit at the surface with a judgment on top of what I think is going on, but to dig deeper and look more closely at the relationships. And I think that's an opportunity that all leaders have now, is to really look at that. So when we look at statistics on disengagement, when we look at statistics on stress-related illness, the assumption is that it's the people's fault. There's no real capacity to dig deeper into why these symptoms are showing up, but they are symptoms. And so part of the projects that I've been working on is a immersive experience to bring awareness back into play that the workplaces now are creating a lot of this stress-related illness. So it's almost like the decisions are creating the stress, and the stress is affecting people, But instead of handling and going back to the actual scope, looking at the big picture, we're going to blame the people instead, which is a really self-defeating approach. So looking ahead, I think what that means is that we're going to be much more thoughtful about what we're doing in workplaces today. I'd like to see the executive level in particular, but at all levels, because that's where the leadership must come from. It must come from all levels. I think we're going to see much more attention given to why things are being done and what is the balance between taking action and I go into workplaces and I see people are under enormous pressure to meet goals and targets and that profit. And there's no capacity to really make the kinds of adjustments required to fit and to meet up with the speed of change. It is radical and it is rapid. And in what's happening in companies that are sticking to those old ways is it's burning people out. And so there's a huge opportunity in companies to change that trajectory, to really stop and reflect, take the time out, and make a more informed and a better choice. Now, when I say that, obviously what has to go with that is a capacity to widen and broaden perspective. That's an absolutely critical requirement, because when you look at only a narrow lens, you can't see anything outside. I guess the easy way to do that is to put your, just with me now, if you put your thumbs in front of you and hold your arms straight out in front of you at chest level, most people can just see the two thumbs. Now just take your arms and move them to your sides across. That's and then behind your back, you can see peripherally. And that is where foresight takes place. That's where the capacity to start to see the interrelationships takes place. It is in the wider view. It is not in the narrow. So massive opportunity for basically an adjustment to mindset. So that's, if we reflect back on what lies ahead, then it's going to be this broadening of this mindset. It's going to be applying values to decisions. It's going to be taking bold leadership moves, which means moving you into new territory, and preferably your entire organization, depending on what your scope of control is inside your company. The alternative to that will be increased pressure. And of course, when we talk about adapt or die, there's been some argument about, oh, no, that's too radical. Well, not really, actually. I did an interview with a gentleman on my other podcast who's the author of the Yoga of Max's Discontent. And privately, he told me that he was watching companies go down almost two or three a week in New York. So this is not trivial. This is not a trivial challenge. It's not a passing cycle. It is a massive opportunity to both lead at a higher level, but see at a deeper level. So, what I call depth perception, going deep. Now, when you look at the anxiety that people are experiencing, when you look at the events particularly the political events in the United States and the polarity that has resulted, and you look at the pressure of migration, and then you come to where I live in Canada, where life is very good. I mean, let's face it, we've taken in refugees and so forth, but our society hasn't been that challenged overall by certainly the things I've seen in Europe in my travels. I've been around the world several times, and so I've had the opportunity to really see through the lens of different worldviews and to be a part of different cultural experiences. And for that, I'm extremely grateful, because it helps me when I go into organizations to understand what's at the root of things. So if the backdrop for the planet or for global consciousness today, if the backdrop for that is at a wider biosphere level, if we think about the planet as a whole, then how nations govern themselves is going to have everything to do with what things look like economically for business, what kind of role business can play. And I'm actually personally here to challenge business to lead, because there's a whole lot of things, as you've been witness to, in the government where there have been a complete inability to step up to a higher level of view and to be able to see things beyond the nation state level. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the need for nation states to determine their future. I appreciate the efforts, the identity, cultural identity of areas like Catalan and various places like that. So this is not a denial of that. It's an understanding that we have a big tapestry to work with, and we're all in this together from a planetary point of view. So to looking forward in terms of what this means for you personally, I see a number of places where people are feeling very anxious, and or if they're making decisions inside, they're running on fear, and it's the fear of not making the next quarter, the fear of this, the fear of that, and fear of losing my job, whatever it is, and or they're making desperate moves around financial or emotional security. So these are deeply rooted requirements, fundamental needs that people have. And when the company is unable to engage the creative talent that people have within, then the entire company starts behaving like a needy child and begins to draw out more than it gives back. And so I've talked to a lot of people who've quit corporate, and it from their point of view is a soul-sucking experience. From the company point of view, they've got the language down, they can talk the talk, but they cannot walk the walk. So again, for the 2018, we're going to see much more a closing of that gap between, in terms of a congruence between talking one thing and doing something else and actually being able to do it. I'm hoping that the millennials will simply not tolerate anything else, because that is the only the only best way for pressure to correct this imbalance between basically organizations that were designed to serve as machines and organizations that are actually truly human and centered on being human and centered on serving all of what we require as a species to function and exist and be in absolute health. So fundamentally, this means that to survive as a species, we don't get desperate, we don't get stupid, we don't start drawing, assuming that we can do whatever we want. We actually get smarter, we get more creative, we use our creative talent that's been there for a long time and it's just been kind of on idle because we haven't really had to call on it. But now's the time for doing that. So many of you that have heard me talk in speeches will have heard me say this. Now, let me go back to anxiety, because this is where feeling comes in, this is where emotion comes in. And I'll share a bit of my story with you, which I've never done. And I have to say it's a bit nerve-wracking to do so now, but I will. In 2003 or 4, when I began this journey of working with the planet in a more holistic way and watching humanity and basically seeing that we weren't adapting fast enough to meet up with the changes, certainly ecologically, then I pulled back and I started doing research into physics, astrophysics, biology, more, deeper insight into what's at the root of all of these things, these dynamics. And by 2006, 7, 8, I began to try putting things forward, which to me look logical to business. Things that just, if you want to survive, then these are the things you have to do. And my gosh, I found out that, as Edward Deming would say, survival is optional. In fact, I absolutely got no feedback whatsoever, no opportunities, no response. By 2009, I'd lost my home to this. I had to leave. I sold it, but I had to leave it. And I didn't have anything left by the time that cleared, because I'd refinanced everything to keep trying. And I've been on the road now for 9 years, and in the course of that, I've had to come to terms with my own source of security. So how do I, as a person, how do I shift perspective? So I look at something and say, well, gee, I don't have this. I look at something through the lens of lack, and instead I look at the same thing and I say, wow, look at how fortunate I am. I have this. And so this is the deeper part of the journey, that no one has to do what I have done in order to grasp this, but it is the part of the journey that asks you to tap more deeply into yourself, to find your emotional security, your financial security, to be at peace with what shows up. And that's the key to it. So essentially what that means is self-regulation, the emotional self-regulation, your capacity to be aware of how you're feeling, you have the ability then to bring that back to a place of joy, to bring it to a place of peace, to bring your heart and center it. And when you do that, you have such a powerful vehicle for ensuring you don't get depressed, for monitoring your self-care, for knowing when workplaces are not the right place for you, for accessing your intuition at a more clear level rather than operating on the set of beliefs that really limit and restrict a view of reality. So I'm offering this story, and there's a number of parts to it, as you can appreciate. But it is really just to point out that this is the journey, not the same one I've been on, but the idea of going deep within yourself and tapping into these inner impulses to be more, to achieve your highest potential, to reach deeper, to contribute your talent, to really make a difference in this world. This is the calling of the now. This is the calling of today. Absolutely no question in my mind whatsoever. So what that means is you are using a lot of techniques to stay centered in yourself. They come from the martial arts, some of them come from yoga, they come from meditation, they come from mindfulness, they come from physiological breathing and so forth. Many, many different doorways to stay centered and be at peace with yourself. But this is how you take something like anxiety, you take something like stress, and you turn it into a benefit for yourself. Because we tend to be pathologically oriented. We tend to look at anxiety and see there's something wrong, we've got to go fix it. It's actually a calling. In many ways, it's a calling to do something different. That is the calling we have in front of us now. For 2018, I think what we're doing is we're spending a lot more time drawing deeper in ourselves, spending a lot less time judging others, instead accepting people for who they are, embracing them for who they are, and then doing all we can to support their emergence as deeply creative, as multiply intelligent across a wider spectrum of intelligences. So even those of you that prefer an analytical or analytical linear logical framework, to know you can open up and access that creative side. We've seen this before, where people will leave their creative brain at home and just take their linear analytical to work. This is a place where we start stretching the brain, accessing some of the somatic intelligence, the physical, the body intelligence, working with some of these deeper emotions that can hijack what's going on and actually prevent success. So if you take your journey as a person and you scale that to the community of people that work inside your company, and then you scale that wider to the communities that you live in and that the companies serve. The company serves so multiple communities in that case. And then you scale it wider to what's our societal impact, what's our ecological impact, what decisions do we need to make so we actually save money, and we restore and regenerate the systems that support us. And of course, the big question is we can't forget about profit. I saw that on LinkedIn the other day, and I thought that was hilarious because nobody's forgetting about profit. This is not about forgetting about profit, but it is about understanding what creates it. And so when you focus on something as narrow as profit, you forget what creates it. And what I'm talking about here in this shift for 2018 is to expand the lens so that you can actually see what creates profit, and then allow the profit to show up, because it does exponentially much more value created by companies that are doing something for a higher purpose or doing something that benefits more people. So that's the exciting part about all of this in my view. What does this mean for you? Well, in summary, there's three lenses. One is the decisions you make. And of course, applying that, the simple way to apply that is to look at things and say, what impact will this decision have on others? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to include and involve in this decision? And how can we look at things differently? In other words, this is using diverse perspectives to make a better choice. So rather than trying to limit the views that come in so that they don't challenge your own view, you have to have the courage as a leader you have the courage to say, look, I know I don't have all the answers. You have to have the humility to say, I don't have all the answers. I need to ask more people. And in doing so, you will then make far better decisions with much less chance of a negative series of unintended consequences. It won't eliminate the unintended consequences, but your increased awareness will at least tell you why things happen, which is important. So that's one part of it, the decision-making lens. The second part of it is shifting perspective, expanding and widening perspective. The narrow view on one single dot means that all these other relationships are being ignored. So wherever you can, go and talk to someone whose point of view is completely different from yours. And explore, ask, and it can be your son, daughter, it can be your partner, it can be whoever it is in your world that you just simply look at them and say, I don't understand you right now. Well, rather than lay that on them, go and say, look, I would really like to learn more from you right now. And ask the questions, not the leading ones, not the sarcastic ones, but ask the questions that invite vulnerability, that invite openness, that invite the response that comes from deep within, the intuitive, the natural, the genuine, the real response that someone is carrying around with them. And you obviously have to listen empathically. You have to listen with your entire body and just turn that mind off and put it on park while you take in this information. So listening skills are deep listening skills are absolutely pivotal. I mentioned in the beginning about observation. This relates to perception, it relates to perspective and worldview as well. The ultimate goal is to be able to move from different worldviews, to be able to see through these different lenses, culturally, variety of different slices, but it's to be able to experience those and understand them. One of the things that I felt that the current democratic systems fail to do is to take into account the cultural backdrop that all of these decisions will be implemented in. So if you take a look at implementing, averting child poverty in Congo, what's the cultural backdrop? If you go to Haiti, what's the cultural backdrop? If you try to avert poverty in the United States of America, what's the cultural backdrop? These help you understand where the levers for change are. We are working in complex systems. Make no mistake about that. There's nothing linear about this at all. Understanding that, in fact, within complexity, there is these specific levers, and they're going to be different in every situation. So top surface symptoms might look like poverty, might look like environmental degradation, might look like economic woes in a large scale, but the lever for correcting them will be fundamentally human and will tie in personal leadership, and then, of course, companies to take that lead on that as well. I had the good fortune this last year, of working with Richard Barrett on his recent research on countries and their values, and I had the opportunity to present that information to a Greek business unit, one of my clients, to really illustrate how personal changes, how you handle yourself personally, how the unit interacted within itself, could leverage change at the national level in terms of economic health. So these are the kinds of levers I'm talking about. They can be within the scale of an organization, or they can be within the scale of you to the national health. There's a lot of room in here. It's extremely exciting. So my journey to getting to where we are today is to be of highest service in terms of assisting with the transformational process, really leveraging through insights and helping provide the deeper set of skills that are required to work with complexity with a great deal of ease and without any kind of tumultuous type of stress or destructive type of stress. There is a version of stress that seems to be a little known called eustress, and eustress is the kind of stress that's actually good for your health, and it helps you because it's a challenge. It goes back to the game science. It goes back to growth mindset. It's the idea that if you put something in front of you, like we're going to eliminate poverty in the world today, or we're going to eliminate child sex slavery, or we're going to restore these ecological systems, if you put something like that in front of you and see it as a challenge, and you engaged all the resources inside your company toward that, then you will actually logically, because you've got the business model, assuming you've done that part, you've looked at the business model and you've got a good one, you will logically get far more done because you're bringing much more online than just the intellect. When people bring their whole selves to work, when they bring their heart to work, it's extremely exciting. So I appreciate you've just listened to a monologue by me, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been of value and of use. I'm excited by what lies ahead for 2018. I think that what has to be done today in today's world, and certainly over this next year, must be done collaboratively, must be done collectively. That includes working on business cultures. The assumption that we have all the answers and we know what we're doing ignores the fact that you can't see what you can't see. So that's where insights come in. That's where having multiple people with different perspectives come in. And by having everybody work together, I mean, the number of companies I see who got a bucket load of consultants and they're all working on individual dots within the system, but the whole picture is not together is disturbing. It is almost a waste in many respects. So the best thing you can do if you're in the area of responsibility and change or transformation is to pull the outside team together so that they can all work together to help the inside team achieve their goal. With respect to change transformation, the other thing to remember is that we are not working in linear systems. So the idea that you would go into an organization and tinker with these different parts and replace this process with this process will get you somewhere, but it will only get you so far. When you remember that these are quantum systems, it's a systems view of life, and if you'd like the reference, you could use Systems View of Life by Fritjof Capra, or look at any of Ervin Laszlo's work. And you will understand that we're combining consciousness, the evolution of human consciousness, which means awareness, higher, deeper sense of purpose, with an understanding of how energy works inside systems. So that means, as Fritjof Capra said, you tickle the system for change. You will notice that the decrees that come from above don't all get traction. And they don't all get traction because it is the emotional and the social system inside a company that really activates, gets things done, basically. So again, I hope that this has offered some idea of why I've been doing what I've been doing, a little bit of a forecast for 2018. What's in it for you is a more expanded set of skills, a tremendous amount of energy focused at creating solutions in working together with other people in collaboration, which I'm totally open to. So I appreciate hearing from you, whether it's in the virtual reality, mixed reality space, or in the human transformation, human potential work, the part we do inside, or on the decision-making front where we look carefully at how to deepen your access to your balance between your intuition and your rational. A number of different fronts there. Great year ahead. I need to thank Ervin Laszlo for including me in The Intelligence of the Cosmos. Chapter 7 is on deep dynamics. I also am excited about what's ahead in terms of both the new paradigm for research, the guide handbook that's just been published, and what's possible using Guy television. So we've got that coming up in May in Tuscany, so I'm excited about all that. Thank you very much for being a part of the Insight to Action podcast. Thank you for listening. Let's see what we can do by working together that we cannot do by working alone. My name is Dawna Jones. You'll find me at FromInsightToAction.com. You'll find me at Twitter, EP Dawna, DAWNA _Jones, and or on LinkedIn. Podcast is Insight to Action, Libsyn.com. I've got a great lineup of programs ahead for you for 2018. Which cover a lot of different topics. So looking forward to sharing those with you. It's an exciting year ahead. I'm excited for all of us as we explore what we're really capable of achieving when we tackle these wicked problems together, using technology as our tools and using other tools we have available to us, but really anchoring the capability within our deep human potential. Looking forward to it.